They slashed my salary by 40% the very day we were officially crowned the #1 tech giant in America. A cold, impersonal email from HR, titled Compensation Realignment, landed in my inbox just as confetti cannons were being wheeled into the atrium for our $3.2 billion revenue celebration. I remember staring at the screen, the words swimming before my eyes, a strange mixture of disbelief and icy rage settling in. The sting wasn't in the money itself, it was the message. At the pinnacle of what I had poured years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights into, I was being quietly erased, sidelined in the very empire I had built with my own hands. I stood frozen for a moment, my champagne glass warming my hand but failing to calm the heat rising inside me. Around me, colleagues cheered, phones flashed, and Julian Croft, our CEO, basked in the applause. His eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, I allowed myself to hope he might notice the betrayal behind my smile. "Elara," he said, patting my shoulder, his words smooth, almost casual. "We did it. Your vision was instrumental." Instrumental. That was the word he chose while slicing away my recognition and my income. I swallowed hard and asked him about the pay cut, keeping my voice steady even though it felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. His reply was a corporate knife wrapped in silk. "Strategic restructuring, Elara. We're all making adjustments." I let it pass, but only for a moment. As the celebration carried on, I overheard a junior VP whispering to a colleague, "Julian just gave his nephew a massive raise. Huge bonus, too." My chest tightened. My heart sank and then clenched in fury. That was the moment I realized the truth. They were celebrating my exit. My loyalty, my late nights, my countless innovations, they didn't matter. I was expendable. And worse, I hadn't even been given the courtesy of knowing. While the room sparkled and laughter filled the air, I felt the weight of being invisible, replaced by someone younger, newer, easier to manipulate. I moved to the edge of the crowd, pretending to toast, while the betrayal churned in my gut. Every smile I forced, every polite clink of glass, sharpened my resolve. They thought this would break me, that I would bow gracefully, embarrassed and demoralized. Instead, in that moment, I made a quiet, unspoken promise to myself. I wouldn't let this be the final chapter. I would turn this humiliation into a reckoning, and they would never see it coming. They thought they were celebrating a victory, but I knew then that their underestimation of me was the first step toward their undoing. The morning after the celebration, the real unraveling started. HR summoned me to a stark, white conference room, its walls echoing every quiet step. They framed it as a strategic role transition, moving me from head of product innovation to a senior mentorship and vision position. In truth, it was a demotion disguised as honor, a meticulously wrapped way to push me aside without confrontation. They spoke of amplifying newer voices, subtly pointing to Chloe, the intern I had once guided, whose wide-eyed admiration had shifted to a mix of uncertainty and pity. Later, I drifted past the executive boardroom, curiosity pulling me forward despite the knot in my stomach. There she was, perched in the chair I had fought so hard to claim, fingers lightly tapping the armrest. It wasn't just a seat. It was a symbol of my achievements, my late nights, and every battle I'd won to build this place. And now it was hers. The irony was bitter. I had trained her, invested in her growth, and in return, I watched the narrative I had written for myself being overwritten. Each passing second felt like erasure, like I was slowly being removed from the story I had authored, my presence fading as if it had never mattered. The walls of the company I had molded now seemed alien, the familiar hum of servers and chatter replaced by the awareness that my influence was being quietly stripped away. Every title, every office corner, every recognition I had earned was slipping beyond my reach. And while they packaged this shift with polite corporate language, I understood its intent perfectly. I was being carefully, systematically edited out. No dramatic confrontation, no sudden ousting, just a subtle, deliberate erasure, leaving me visible in body but invisible in authority. I left the room quietly, each step echoing a mixture of disbelief and resolve, knowing that while they thought they were controlling the narrative, I was already plotting the next chapter. I returned home that evening, exhaustion weighing on me like a leaden coat, and sank onto the couch. My gaze drifted toward a forgotten corner of my closet, where an old, dust-covered box sat, neglected for years. Something compelled me to open it, and inside lay the original master service agreement for Aura Core, the very architecture I had designed from scratch, the invisible engine powering every product they celebrated so loudly. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the brittle pages I had drafted myself, each word a testament to long nights of relentless work and meticulous attention to detail. Then my eyes froze on Clause 11.4. My stomach dropped. The licensing agreement was set to expire in just 22 days. A sudden, sharp panic clawed at me, and I scrambled through my inbox, heart hammering, until I found the message from Julian, buried under weeks of corporate noise. Hey Alara, vendor renewal thing attached. Handle when you can. They had all overlooked it. Completely. The realization hit me like ice water. The entire foundation of their billion-dollar empire rested on a single agreement that only I fully comprehended. They had assumed it would renew seamlessly, as if by magic, unaware that the continuity of every system, every client account, every revenue stream depended entirely on my knowledge. For the first time, I saw clearly how fragile the empire truly was and how utterly reliant it was on me, the architect they were so eager to discard. And suddenly, what had felt like defeat began to twist into a dangerous opportunity. They had underestimated the depth of my involvement, and in that oversight lay the power I had long been denied. Their ignorance, their carelessness, their dismissal, they had handed me a tool more potent than any boardroom authority. The means to make them face the consequences of ignoring the one person who actually knew how to keep the whole machine alive. As the realization settled, a quiet determination rose within me, replacing despair with focus. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming control over the structure they had foolishly assumed they could run without me. And in that moment, I understood that the coming days would change everything. I didn't quit. I didn't yell or demand answers. I simply went quiet. Silence became my armor, and precision became my weapon. I returned to my desk as if nothing had happened, logging into the systems that still bore my name and authority. They hadn't revoked my access yet. Of course they hadn't. They still thought of me as harmless, predictable, compliant. That mistake would cost them everything. I began the process not with destruction, but reclamation. Every line of code, every buried subroutine in Oracore had a fingerprint, mine. I started retrieving what was rightfully mine, rewriting pathways only I understood. No viruses, no dramatic crashes. Just a quiet sequence of expiration triggers woven deep into the architecture. They weren't designed to break anything. They were built to remind them who truly held the keys. Each adjustment was deliberate, almost surgical. I added tiny delays to data transfers, fractional inconsistencies in the load balancer, microtimers buried beneath 1,000 layers of logic. To the untrained eye, they looked like harmless quirks. But they were signals, breadcrumbs of ownership. At night, I sat alone in my apartment, lines of code glowing against the dark, my reflection faint in the monitor. The rhythmic tapping of my keyboard was the only sound, steady and purposeful. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was reclamation, a quiet exhale of control. Every command I entered was lawful, traceable only to my original authorship. Nothing malicious, nothing illegal. Just logic returning to its source. The first sign appeared within a week. Reports of system latency began circulating through internal chat threads. Dashboards flickered. Data streams froze for seconds before resuming. Engineers called them minor performance anomalies, running endless diagnostics that revealed nothing. Watching from the sidelines, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, I wasn't powerless. I was still there, unseen, unacknowledged, but very much present. I didn't interfere with operations or touch confidential data. I simply withdrew my invisible scaffolding, the quiet support they never realized existed. Without my framework, their structure was already wobbling. I was becoming something else, something they couldn't name or trace. A whisper in the circuits, an echo of what they tried to erase. Each morning, I walked into that building with the same neutral expression, nodding politely to people who thought I was irrelevant. But deep down, I knew the truth. They were running on borrowed time. The empire they believed was theirs had already started to unravel from the inside out, guided by my unseen hand. I had become the ghost in their machine, and haunting had never felt so justified. The first signs of collapse came quietly, like the faint creak before a structure gives way. By the third week, internal channels were flooded with frantic updates. Engineers scrambled to explain why data from the East Coast servers wasn't syncing properly. Client portals froze mid-session, contracts failed to load, and transaction reports showed flickering discrepancies that made no mathematical sense. Every department blamed another, their slack threads turning into a storm of confusion and accusation. Ben, one of the few genuine engineers I respected, sent me a private message. "Alara, these issues don't look random," he wrote. "They're too clean. It's like the system is dismantling itself piece by piece." I stared at the message for a long moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. He was right. What they were witnessing wasn't sabotage. It was the natural unraveling of a framework that had always depended on my unseen maintenance. I had simply stopped holding it together. Meanwhile, Onyx Tech's war room turned into a theater of panic. Meetings that once brimmed with arrogance now dissolved into shouting matches. Julian stood at the center, suit immaculate but patience unraveling, demanding answers that no one could give. Reports from clients poured in: slow performance, broken integrations, missed deadlines. Their billion-dollar image of invincibility was cracking right before their eyes. I watched from a distance, outwardly calm, inwardly detached. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same executives who once dismissed my warnings were now tearing each other apart over problems they couldn't diagnose. No patch or emergency update could fix what was happening. The system wasn't crashing, it was decaying in slow motion, with every unnoticed dependency revealing just how much they had relied on me. At some point, someone must have mentioned my name in the chaos. Ben later told me Julian had laughed it off. "Alara? She's not capable of something like this," he'd said with a dismissive wave, his voice dripping with the same patronizing tone he always used when he wanted to sound magnanimous. Those words reached me through whispers, and they made me smile, not out of spite but clarity. He still didn't understand who I was. They had imagined I would crumble when pushed aside, that I'd retreat quietly and fade into irrelevance. Instead, I was watching their empire fracture under the weight of their own negligence. Every flicker on their dashboards, every failed connection, was a quiet reminder that I hadn't disappeared. I had simply learned to let go, and in letting go, I let them fall. The message came late at night, just as I was closing my laptop. A single word blinked across my phone screen. "Dinner?" The number wasn't saved, but I didn't need to check. There was only one person who would reach out that way: Naomi Thorne, the CEO of Ethereum. The same woman who had once looked me straight in the eye years ago and said, "You're building a kingdom for someone else, Alara. One day they'll forget who built it." Back then I'd laughed it off, too loyal, too proud, too naive. Now her words echoed with cruel accuracy. I hesitated for a moment, then replied with a simple, "When?" Her response came within seconds. "Tomorrow. Usual place." The usual place was an upscale restaurant downtown where industry rivals had always met under the illusion of civility. I hadn't been there in years, but when I walked in the next evening, Naomi was already waiting. Her posture was relaxed, her expression sharp. She had always carried herself like someone who knew exactly how to turn opportunity into leverage. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I've been watching Onyx Tech," she said, her voice smooth, confident. "It's unraveling beautifully." She smirked slightly, the kind of smile that only comes from recognizing someone else's handiwork. "The patterns are distinct. They're yours." I didn't confirm or deny it, just met her gaze in silence. She leaned in, eyes bright with interest. "I want Aura Core," she continued. "I want your mind, the real backbone of what's keeping them alive right now." Her tone softened, almost persuasive. "But more than that, I want to give you what they refused, a seat at your own table. Name your price, or," she paused, her voice dropping just above a whisper, "let's build something new. Together. Your name on the door this time." For a moment, the clatter of glasses and quiet music faded around us. Her offer hung in the air, steady and undeniable. It wasn't just business, it was recognition. A chance to step out from behind someone else's shadow and claim what was always mine. I studied her face, the calculated boldness behind her calm exterior. She wasn't driven by pity or charity. She saw value, power, and potential. I took a slow breath, letting the idea settle. There was something poetic about it. The same rival who once competed against me now extending a hand, not as an adversary, but as a partner. The thought of finally working for myself, under my own banner, stirred something deep within me that had been dormant since the day Julian's email arrived. I didn't answer her right away. I simply raised my glass, met her eyes, and said, "Let's see if you're serious." Her smile widened knowingly. That was the moment the next chapter began, not with revenge, but with rebirth. I went back to the building one final time, long after the last employees had left for the night. The halls were dim, the hum of the fluorescent lights echoing against glass and concrete. My keycard still granted access. Another oversight from a company too distracted to notice the quiet figure walking through its core. Each step felt deliberate, an ending written in motion. I wasn't there for confrontation or chaos. I was there to close a chapter on my own terms. The elevator descended to the lowest level, where the air was cooler, heavy with the scent of metal and static. The secure server vault stood exactly as I remembered, silent, sterile, and humming with power. Only a few of us had ever been permitted inside, and that exclusivity had once felt like honor. Now it was simply the stage for my exit. I approached the reinforced door, keyed in the same code I'd created years ago, and watched as the lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside, rows of machines blinked like sleepless sentinels. I walked past them, toward the small safe tucked behind a partition wall. The weight of the envelope in my hand felt symbolic, final proof that I had always been more than they were willing to admit. I opened the safe, placed the original, signed Oracore master agreement inside, and beside it, I set a folded note written in my own hand. The ink was steady, the message simple. You didn't just break a contract. You broke the architect. To rebuild, start with the root directory and remember who wrote it. EV. I stared at those words for a moment, the silence pressing in around me. It wasn't bitterness that filled me. It was clarity. Everything they were now losing had been built from the foundation I laid. Every failed system, every unanswered call from clients, every sleepless night in their war rooms. All of it traced back to their single mistake, forgetting who made them possible. I closed the safe gently, not as a final gesture of defiance, but as a seal on the past. There was nothing left to retrieve or destroy. I had already taken what mattered, my knowledge, my identity, my power. The rest was just debris. As I made my way out, the hum of the servers followed me, like the faint pulse of something that didn't yet realize it was dying. My reflection flashed briefly in the glass doors as I exited into the night. I didn't look back. They would find what I left soon enough, a relic of their arrogance, a reminder carved in my own handwriting. They wanted to erase me, but I had already written my name into the foundation. And now I was finally free of it. The morning of the launch arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The auditorium buzzed with restless anticipation. Reporters, analysts, and rival executives packed shoulder to shoulder beneath the spotlights. Cameras panned across the stage as Naomi Thorne and I took our positions, the Vance Ether logo shimmering on the massive screen behind us. It was more than a company reveal. It was the moment I stepped out of the shadows I had once built for others. I could feel every gaze fixed on me, the murmurs swelling into silence when I reached the podium. My reflection stared back from the sleek surface of the teleprompter. But I didn't need a script. My words had been rehearsed in my mind for months, forged from every sleepless night, every betrayal, every quiet act of reclamation. For those wondering where I've been, I began, letting the stillness hang. I was in the foundation of your favorite company, ensuring it didn't collapse. Now I've laid a new one. The statement rolled across the hall like a slow-building wave, equal parts revelation and reckoning. Faces I recognized from Onyx Tech's leadership flickered on the livestream feed. Some pale, others frozen in disbelief. They were watching me reclaim what they once thought they had taken forever. Naomi tapped the console beside her, and the screen behind us came alive. The first live demo of Oracore 2.0 appeared. Sleeker, faster, immune to the vulnerabilities that had crippled Onyx Tech's infrastructure. Every process, every line of code bore the precision and resilience I had once been denied credit for. The industry audience erupted into a roar of applause mixed with shock. As the lights intensified, I caught glimpses of live news banners flashing across digital walls. Vance Ether unveils revolutionary AI platform. Elara Vance returns with game-changing tech. Onyx Tech faces collapse amid competitors' rise. I didn't smile. I simply stood still, calm in the storm of cameras and cheers. The unveiling wasn't about vengeance. It was about restoration. I had taken everything they undervalued and transformed it into something unshakable. When the Q&A began, someone from the press called out, "Elara, do you think Onyx Tech can recover?" I looked up, unflinching. "You can't rebuild on ruins," I said quietly. "Not when the architect has moved on." The room went silent again. This time, it wasn't confusion, it was recognition. They understood exactly who had written the blueprint of their downfall. That night, Headlines spread across every platform. Investors fled from Onyx Tech within hours. The ghost in their machine had stepped into the light, and the industry would never see me the same way again. From my glass-walled office overlooking the city, I watched the collapse unfold with quiet detachment. The reports arrived in steady rhythm. Onyx Tech systems faltering one by one, entire networks freezing as the expiration triggers I had written executed flawlessly. It wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. The kind of failure that moves through an organization like slow poison. Within hours, their most profitable divisions went dark. Clients demanded answers, but no one at Onyx Tech could provide them. Without legal access to Oracore, their engineers were effectively blind. Their billion-dollar infrastructure had been built on foundations they didn't own, and now that truth was unraveling in real time. Financial analysts on every major outlet began piecing together the story. How did a market leader lose its core technology overnight? Headlines spiraled. Investors withdrew. Stock values cratered. By noon, Julian's carefully crafted empire had lost nearly half its worth. When the emergency board meeting leaked online, the footage was surreal. Julian sat at the end of a long table, his confidence stripped away. The directors demanded answers about the expired license, about the missing renewal, about how the architect had walked away with the company's soul. Someone slammed a folder on the table, shouting, "You ignored her warnings." The clip went viral within an hour. He was removed as CEO by the end of the week, publicly, brutally. The investigation that followed uncovered layers of negligence. Unfiled renewals, misappropriated budgets, and performance reports falsified to cover internal decay. His legacy turned to ash overnight. The man who once lectured me about vision was now being dissected by journalists and regulators alike. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't say a word. I simply watched as everything they had built on my back collapsed under its own arrogance. Van Seether's numbers, meanwhile, soared. Our launch had converted half of Onyx Tech's biggest clients within days. Their migration emails often included a quiet note of respect. We should have known who the real architect was. For the first time in years, my name filled the headlines not as a forgotten contributor, but as the story itself. I had become the protagonist, the one who rebuilt from betrayal, the ghost who had returned not to haunt, but to reign. And as Onyx Tech's final trading bell rang, signaling its delisting from the exchange, I closed my laptop and whispered to the empty room. The foundation remembers its maker. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of my new office, the skyline of San Francisco glittering like a promise I'd finally kept to myself. My assistant walked in with a calm smile, a folder in one hand and a small cardboard box in the other. "The IPO is finalized, Alara," she said softly. "Van Seether goes public next week." Her words settled in the air like music. Years of silence, restraint, and precision had led to this moment. I had rebuilt what was once stolen from me, not by shouting, not by revenge in its loudest form, but through quiet, deliberate creation. I opened the folder briefly, scanning the figures. Every line confirmed what I already knew. We had surpassed every projection, outperformed every legacy company, and established a foundation entirely our own. Then I turned to the box. Inside, cushioned by a layer of packing paper, was something small but familiar, the nameplate from my old Onyx Tech office. Alara Vance, Head of Product Innovation. The same plaque they had taken down the day they stripped me of my title, the same one that had once sat outside a door I no longer belonged to. Someone had found it, probably forgotten in a storage room marked for disposal, and sent it anonymously. I held it in my hands for a long moment, feeling the faint scratches along the engraved letters. It didn't sting anymore. That title had been their way of containing me, of boxing my worth into a single department. Now, standing in the heart of a company bearing my own name, it felt almost quaint. I placed the plaque carefully on the top shelf of my bookcase, neither as a trophy nor a warning, but as a quiet reminder of everything they underestimated. The city stretched far below, alive with motion and opportunity. Somewhere out there, Julian Croft was probably watching my company's rise from the sidelines, realizing too late that erasing me had only made me permanent. I didn't hate him anymore. There was no need. My existence, my success, my silence had already rewritten the ending. My assistant lingered at the doorway. "Would you like me to send out a statement for the IPO?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Just 3 words," I said. "The foundation stands." She nodded, closing the door behind her. I turned back to the view, the city lights beginning to spark as the evening settled in. I had rebuilt everything they took, and more. Not through vengeance, but through vision. My silence hadn't been weakness. It had been preparation. If my story reminds you that strength doesn't always roar, tell me your thoughts below. Have you ever had to rebuild after someone tried to erase you? Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that even from ashes, you can rise again. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of quiet, unstoppable transformation. Do you think I was right to walk away and rebuild everything from scratch instead of fighting to stay where I was never valued? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if my journey inspired you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories of power, resilience, and quiet revenge.